And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast. And today we're travelling into the worlds of audio. But maybe not the audios you expected, because it's not Big Finish today. We're taking a look at the most recent pair of releases from BBC Audiobooks, starting with The Mind Trap by John Peel. I'm Kenny Smith, and let's have a quick look at the cover blurb. It tells us David Troughton reads a brand new tale featuring the second Doctor, Jamie and Zoe. The Doctor makes a hasty landing on a satellite, only to discover that it's a one-man prison in space. See what they've done there? Markin is in exile from his own people, banished to live out his remaining days with only his robot for company. When the Doctor and Zoe learn of the crimes that led to Markin's sentence, they have very little sympathy. But returning to the TARDIS isn't as easy as it should be, and Markin is determined to get there first. David Troughton, who has played several roles in Doctor Who, reads John Peel's intriguing story of reckless genius and the power that can be gained by control of the mind. Cover design by Lee Johnson. And what's in the cover? Well, we can see there's some sort of chamber and hall. We've got the second Doctor there, Zoe in her spangly silver jumpsuit, Jamie standing by the console. There's some sort of robotic man on tractors, and in the background we can see there's screens of the Doctor's face phasing away into the distance, and yeah, it's a beautifully put together piece of work. And so let's pause for a second and hear an excerpt.
BBC Audiobooks presents Doctor Who, The Mind Trap by John Peel. Read by David Troughton. The sky was pale lilac, and a weary, worn-out sun cast its feeble light down onto three lone figures struggling across a snowy landscape. In the lead was a scruffy-looking man of indeterminate age, watching carefully as he plopped one foot after another in the snowy wastes. Following in his wake, and skipping occasionally, was a slight young woman with a saucy grin on her face. Bringing up the rear, clumping unhappily along, was a young man in a thick parka and a patterned kilt. He paused for a moment. Jamie sneezed explosively and then gave the Doctor a bleak look. "I feel awfully bad," he gasped. "Oh, it's just a cold," Zoe said rather smugly. "Nothing to worry about." "Aye, well, that's easy for you to say," the young Scotsman replied. "You don't..." "No, I don't," the young woman replied. "But then I also don't go chasing ice warriors across snowy wastes in a short skirt, do I?" She indicated her silver catsuit with a smile. "I dress sensibly." "It's no a skirt," Jamie replied sulkily. "It's a kilt." Then he sneezed violently again. "Skirt, kilt, whatever," Zoe said, shrugging. "It's not that I'm not sympathetic, it's simply that there's nothing to be done about it. Even in my day and age, there's no cure for the common cold." "Is that a fact, Doctor?" The Doctor's rather mobile face twitched. "Ah, well, yes and no," he prevaricated. Zoe gave a slight frown. "And what's that supposed to mean?" They had reached the TARDIS at last, and there was a short pause whilst the Doctor unlocked the door to his time and space machine. As he ushered them inside, which of course was illogically larger than it should have been, he explained, "In your day and age there was no cure. But I have a friend from a different day and age. Dastari invented this wonderful gadget that can cure a cold in just a few hours. I like the sound of that, Jamie said, sniffing loudly. The doctor nodded. And I know I saw it around here just the other year or so, he said, frowning in concentration. He stood in the control room, spinning slowly on his heels. Now, where did I put it? He held up his right hand, one finger pointing uncertainly as he turned in a slow circle. Then he grinned widely and dashed forward to one of the roundels set in the TARDIS wall. It opened up to show a small, crowded cupboard behind it. It's in here somewhere, he said vaguely. He began taking items out and tossing them over his shoulder onto the floor. Temporal oscillator, frabjack. He paused, holding something that looked like a tuning fork with a spring attached. No idea what that is. It went onto the floor anyway. He pounced on what looked like a skull cap of some kind, attached to a small box by a couple of wires. Here we are. I knew it was here. He turned round, blinking as he saw the mess on the floor. You really should try and be more tidy, Zoe, he chided her unjustly. Right, Jamie, we'll have you feeling better in no time at all.
Lovely stuff. Now, it's time to hear from the author.
My name's John Peel, and basically I write almost anything I can. At the moment, the latest one is The Mind Trap.
How did a commission for this one come about?
Well, it was kind of strange, really. What happened was I was doing a podcast, and we were joking around about vague plot ideas, and I said, well, the TARDIS has this... The telepathic circuits. Now, what if a villain somehow controlled the telepathic circuits in the TARDIS? What could it cause? And I suddenly thought, whoa, wait a minute, that's a good idea, And I sent the idea into John Ainsworth, who's the editor behind these audios, and John responded that he liked the idea of a trap, but he didn't think it was a good idea to use the TARDIS itself. So as a result of which, instead of being the TARDIS trap, it became the Mind Trap. And we evolved from that. It's great fun working with John, actually, because he's a good editor. And his points usually, if he makes a point, there's a real reason for it. He's not just trying to be, I'm in charge and I think this is a good idea kind of thing. It's always well thought out and it really helps the story. So we've kind of back and forth a bit on the idea, and then when we nail it down, I often write it.
Fantastic. So when did it become a second Doctor adventure? And I'd imagine that this is an incarnation you have a lot of fondness for.
Oh, I have a great deal of fun with it. And it was interesting. At the time when Patrick Troughton was the Doctor, I was really upset because I was like 11 years old. What do you know at that age for discrimination and things? And I really loved Hartnell, so I was very annoyed when this idiot took over the role. And I basically stopped watching for most of Troughton's run, although I caught a few stories. And it wasn't until later, when of course most of them were missing, that I actually started to really appreciate his Doctor. And in fact, over time, I've come to really, really enjoy writing second Doctor stories. So it's been an interesting reversal of opinion for me, and I find him just such a great character to write for. So when John said to me, "Which Doctor would you like to use?" I said, "Oh, Troughton," immediately, because I could see him doing this role.
And of course, you've got Jamie and Zoe with him. So what made you go for that pairing over the others?
One of the few Troughtons that I did watch at the time it was broadcast was The Mind Robber, which I absolutely adored. I mean, how can you not adore a Doctor Who story where they blow up the TARDIS in the first episode, And I love that teaming. The team of the three of them really worked well in my mind. So there's the reason I picked them. There was also a secondary consideration in the back of my mind, that I thought, well, both Fraser and Wendy are alive, so either of them could read the story. It would be great. And of course, they actually picked David Troughton to do it. That kind of didn't work. I mean, I really have no idea who they're going to get to read the stories, so I just write them as is and see what happens. But David did a terrific job reading this. There are times when he's talking the second Doctor lines, and it really sounds like his father.
It's quite uncanny. It really is.
Yeah. And he has the right inflections and everything. It's not just the voice, it's the manner of speaking, which is very important. And he's really got that down. It's terrific.
The thing I really enjoyed is that listening to this, I felt like this is something you could watch on stage. It feels like a proper chamber piece with a small cast. And I think that's what absolutely works.
Well, the previous story I'd done, River of Death, had a large cast of characters, and it kind of got confusing after a while who was doing what and everything, and you had to be very careful, especially reading of it, to keep the characters separate. And I thought a smaller cast would really work in this this idea. It would work better. And I mean, even the robot doesn't speak, so it's just the four characters in the whole story. And I think that works very well. It's certainly easy to keep track of everybody.
It feels like it would have worked as a really nice two-parter in between a couple of stories. It's got that kind of sort of lets you slow down when you're going between the insane, crazy action of the invasion and things like that, to give you something just a little bit more sedate, and there's proper talking and conversations, and you do get to build up this wonderful villainous character.
Well, that was it. I wanted to create a new villain rather than use an existing character in this case. And I just like the idea of a character who's completely amoral. He's basically he's a psychopath. He doesn't consider, well, sociopath actually. He doesn't consider what damage he's doing. It's just, I've got this really great idea. Let me try it. And damn the consequences kind of thing. And he just doesn't see that he's a villain. He thinks he's perfectly okay. And that's what makes him interesting, I think. That the very fact that he has this image of himself which is totally unaligned with what he actually is. And that's what makes him kind of creepy, I think, really. The way that he's just completely divorced from reality in that way.
I think also without giving too many spoilers away, the way that he gets inside people's minds and gets them to see things to his way is quite a horrible notion, that sort of losing the way that your own mind works and you have somebody else picking your brains, and I don't like that.
Well, again, I thought the Troughton Doctor would be the perfect one to express this horror. I mean, Hartnell, for example, would not have been horrified. He would have been very annoyed, more than anything. But Troughton panics so beautifully that I think it really works well in this situation. He can see the consequences coming way in advance and panics.
I also like the way that you've managed to get Jamie out for half the story. Basically, you're giving Fraser Hines his week off on holiday, as they would do on TV as well. Was that a conscious thing? Because it seemed to me that was very much a little in-joke.
Well, it's a question of how do you start the story. And I thought it would be kind of funny if I started with a joke on poor old Jamie. And they kept him sidelined for most of the story. Plus, I think there's a kind of wonderful interaction between the Doctor and Zoe, which would be stopped with Jamie saying, "Oh, but I don't understand," and you would get a lot of that. And I thought, no, really, I just want to have the Doctor and Zoe, just having quick conversations back and forth. So poor old Jamie got sidelined as a result.
But of course, it does play a big part in the story later on, but we won't go into the spoilers for that. I thought you very much got Jamie and Zoe's characters to a T, particularly when Jamie's quite happy to go and have a sleep and just think, yeah, he'd probably go and have a wee feed and then a wee snooze.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's very much the way he is. He's not interested in exploring so much, whereas Zoe, of course, you can't keep her back. She's just out there and raring to go. So she's the perfect companion for the Doctor in his explorations. But I do think that there's this lovely feeling between the Doctor and Zoe that works very well. And I was writing it, as I was saying, in the idea that maybe Wendy Pabry will be asked to read the story. It would work even well with that. But David did a lovely job of her character also, so it worked out nicely for everything in the end.
I thought the Doctor-Zoe relationship, it felt very much like the Crotons, where they're the clever ones, or the high brains, if we wish, are off doing their own thing while Jamie's not there, and they definitely are enjoying that intellectual stimulus and pushing each other and teasing each other.
Yes, exactly. They do lovely. I suppose these are only an hour long, so they're basically audio short stories. And I guess if I had the opportunity to 2-hour story, I would probably put Jamie back in it again. He wouldn't have been out for so long. But for the 1 hour, it worked well, I thought.
How do you find working to this format with that? You've got your hour compared to a novel or anything like that?
Well, actually, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. One of the things about being a writer is you do everything yourself. You can see I'm here in my office, and I sit here every day, and I do my work and everything. And I obviously correspond with with John, my editor, and everything. But it's me on my own doing my thing, kind of thing. Whereas doing stuff like comic book strips, and audio, I am actually working with other people, even though I don't see what they're doing and I only get the end result. And it's fascinating for me because I see it warmly in my mind, if you like. And it's interesting to see how other people read what I've written and respond to it and create their view of what I've done. So it's like having a partner without knowing what's going on. So yes, I love it. It really is great when I finally hear the finished result.
Yeah,
and they do a great job of it. I mean, the sound effects, the music, and picking the actors to do the reading. It's all a surprise to me. It's all fun.
And it's a beautiful cover on it too. It looks very 60s with all those chrome shades, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a great cover. It's actually the second cover, because what happened the first time around is they put Zoe in a wrong costume. Then they had, because I specifically mentioned it's the silver catsuit.
Yeah.
So John caught that and said, "No, we have to change the image of it." But it's really gorgeous. It's very well done. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, I also, talking of the catsuit, there is that lovely little throwaway line that you think, oh, hang on, John's made a mistake. But it does get explained, because I was thinking, hang on a minute. But of course, it all makes sense in the end. So,
well,
yeah.
That's it. I mean, you have to plot things so that you have this hang on a minute kind of moment. And then, as you say, is it a mistake, or is it something a little more subtle? And hopefully it's a little more subtle.
It most definitely
there are
is.
occasional mistakes, but that wasn't one of them, thank goodness.
Yeah. So this has been a happy experience. So if you could do another one with another doctor, who would you like to do if you could pick?
Pertwee. Mostly because I haven't written a Pertwee story. And he actually was my favorite doctor at the time the show was on. I just loved Pertwee. But for some reason, I've not gotten around to do any stories about him. So that will be a lovely idea, I think.
Yep.
Plus, they've got, again, there's quite a few people around that they could use for voices. So, it would be nice. And to have a go at the Brigadier, of course, with him would help.
Definitely. John Culshaw does such a great job.
Yes, exactly.
John, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure, as always.
Oh, I've enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you.
Doctor Who, The Mind Trap is available now from BBC Audio. You can get it either as a CD or as a download. And you can get it from places like Apple Books, Audible, Google Play, Hive, Kobo, Libro FM, Spotify and Xigzag. That's with an X at the front. So let's move on and take a look at our second release of the day. And this is Doctor Who Starflight, which has been written by friend of the podcast, Paul Hayes. And, well, let's find out more about it. It's a first Doctor adventure, and it tells us. Christopher Naylor reads a brand new adventure for the First Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara. The TARDIS materialises on board Cavus Sunliner's Flight 307, a regularly scheduled passenger flight using a revolutionary type of interstellar travel. The Doctor, his granddaughter Susan, and schoolteachers Ian and Barbara meet Chief Officer Sopel, beleaguered commander of the vessel. Following an act of investigation, the ship is boarded by a large levitating alien creature who demands the return of an artefact. Influencing the ship's AI pilot, Pym, the Cleed threatens to shut off all life support. With Pym and the Cleed engaged in a deadlock battle for control, and more aliens on their way, the Doctor must help the crew outwit their attackers. But time is running out. Let's pause now, shall we, and hear an excerpt from the opening 5 minutes, courtesy of BBC Audiobooks.
BBC Audiobooks presents Doctor Who Starflight by Paul Hayes, read by Christopher Naylor. Everything aboard Flight 307 had been fine, until suddenly it wasn't. The problem with artificial gravity was that it worked perfectly until the moment your ship came to a sudden, unexpected halt. Then, in the seconds before emergency systems could compensate, the gravity's effects remained all too genuine, sending anything and anyone unsecured flying as if the ship had hit a wall. So it was with Chief Officer Jacet Sopel, who was propelled backwards across the crew room, anticipating a painful bang on the head. Suddenly, though, there had no longer been any sensation of falling or flying, only of floating. Cups, plates, cutlery, and dozens of other items which had been scattered through the cabin were also suspended, gently drifting in mid-air.
"Pym!" Sopel shouted. "What the hell is going on?"
A cool, calm, level voice replied from all corners of the room.
"It was necessary to deactivate the artificial gravity." "I can tell that,"
Sopel snapped back, still floating helplessly.
"Why was it necessary?"
"The ship fell out of Starflight,"
Pym replied, remaining calm. From away down the corridor in the passenger cabin, Sopel could hear assorted shouts, screams and cries of distress, and could only trust that Corinne, the cabin crew lead, would have her team dealing with the situation.
"Again, why?"
Sopel demanded.
"There was a
sudden change in the mass of the ship, which altered the Starflight calculations.
Pym's pause, an indication of uncertainty, was troubling.
A change in the mass of the ship while we were in Starflight? Indeed. How is that possible? It should not be.
Sopel was drifting nearer to a wall, waiting to be close enough to push out and be propelled across towards the emergency equipment cupboard.
What's the damage and injury status?
Sopel asked.
All 104 aboard accounted for,
Pym reported.
No serious injuries believed to have been sustained by either passengers or crew. No major damage to systems detected.
That at least was something, Sopel thought. But the cause of the sudden stop was still very concerning.
Can we go to Starflight again? No data,
said Pym.
But I would strongly advise against it. What caused the change in mass anyway? Unclear,
Pym answered.
The reading is constantly in flux. I've never experienced anything like it before.
Sopel paused to consider.
Do you know where it is? Yes. Luggage hold C.
Sopel thought for another few moments.
How far is the nearest assistance? No signals from ships or stations within range. Put out a general repeating distress call anyway,
Sopel instructed.
Someone may come into range and hear it.
The wall was now finally close enough to push against and float towards the emergency equipment cupboard, where the magnetic boots were kept in case of gravity failure. Sopel briefly considered unlocking the box for the stunners, carried in the event of a passenger proving violently uncooperative, but decided there would be enough panic without any crew member being seen to be armed, so he instead addressed another question to Pym.
What can you tell me about this thing in the cargo hold? Little,
Pym replied, at least having the decency to sound ever so slightly embarrassed about it.
Sensors continue to be unable to give any reliable readings, and it is out of range of the camera in that hold.
It would be, Sopel muttered.
So the only way to find out what it is to go down and have a look. Correct.
So there we go. There's your 5-minute excerpt, courtesy of our friends at BBC Audiobooks, as was the first clip earlier on. Taking a quick look at the cover, we've got a picture of Hartnell from the Web Planet with his hands crossed, looking upwards. Barbara with a coat on, Susan, I think that's a Sensorites picture, and Ian looking imperious in the background. And we can see behind them they're in some sort of corridor with space outside, and there's a tendrilled plant there. It looks like a plant-like growth. It's perhaps like a hammerhead, something like that, and bits growing out of it. But what could it be? Well, let's find out from the man who knows. So, let's welcome back to the Power of Three, Paul Hayes, who of course has joined us previously to talk about his books The Long Game and Pool to Open. So let's hear about how his first work of fiction came about in the Doctor Who universe.
My name is Paul Hayes. I'm a Doctor Who fan. I have been ever since the year dot, basically, personally. Since I was a little tiny child in the late 80s, I've written various bits and pieces, a couple of books about the history of the show and various articles for Doctor Who magazine, and out now this month, very excitingly, particularly for me, my very first piece of Doctor Who fiction, my very first piece of professional fiction of any kind, a BBC audiobook called Doctor Who Starflight, an adventure for the original TARDIS team, the First Doctor, Susan, Barbara and Ian.
Well, I was about to ask, so how did this whole thing come about, given that obviously you'd had a good working relationship with BBC Audio when it came to the audio reading?
Yes, well, it all started from the same route, really. It's had quite a long gestation. It all started back at the 60th anniversary, which feels like a long time ago now. And Robert Seater, who used to be the head of BBC History, he asked the BBC Written Archive Centre if they could recommend someone to write a piece for the history of the BBC website for the Doctor Who 60th anniversary. They very kindly recommended me, so I wrote the piece for Robert for that part of the BBC website, which he liked, and he then invited me to be a guest on a panel that he was putting together for a Doctor Who 60th anniversary staff event at Broadcasting House in London in November December 2023, which was great to be asked. Although it was amazing when I sort of thought, what the hell am I doing here? Because it was the panelists were me, Rebecca Ferguson, the drama commissioning editor, Vanessa Hamilton, the Doctor Who brand director, and Tyrell Charles, the podcast host. So it was very much kind of like, well, what on earth am I doing here? This is surely some mistake. But so it's a big Q&A event, big sort of BBC staff event where we talked about Doctor Who, and then there was a Q&A. And one of the people there was Michael Stevens, the editor of the BBC Audiobooks Doctor Who range, and he very kindly mentioned when he asked a question during the Q&A that he'd read and enjoyed my book Pull to Open about the creation of Doctor Who. And so having always, ever since my whole life, I've always wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer of fiction, wanted to write novels. It's turned out with the way things have gone that I'm actually much better at writing non-fiction than I am at fiction. I find non-fiction just somehow more instinctive. I can write it a lot better. Fiction I find very, very difficult to do well. But it's what I've always wanted to do. So knowing that Michael had read Pull to Open, I thought, well, I've got to try and take advantage of this. So I sent him an email after the event just saying, is there any chance I could pitch some ideas for the BBC audio range that you do? And he very kindly said yes. And one of the things that came out of that was that he really wanted to do an audiobook of Pull to Open, my non-fiction book. So we did that. But also he very kindly let me pitch some ideas for Doctor Who stories, and he and John Ainsworth, who sort of edits the range with him, they picked one of the ideas of mine that they liked, and so I worked up a storyline for that. They liked the storyline, and I got commissioned to write the audiobook, which was the most amazing thing, to actually write a little bit of real life Doctor Who for the BBC as well. And it's just incredible. I remember when I got the email with the contract, and because it's an audiobook, it's referred to as a script, and so it comes like this email from the BBC saying, here is the contract for your Doctor Who script, which is just it's that amazing. It's like, wow, so it was really amazing how it all came to, because I'd sort of reached the stage. I'm 42 now. I was at the end of my 30s then when it all started, and I sort of reached the stage where I kind of thought, nothing like this was ever going to happen, and it has. So I feel very lucky and very fortunate, and it's all very exciting.
Yeah, I can believe it. I'm 52 and it's still not happened for me, but hey, I can but dream that I'll one day be showrunner.
Well, it just goes to show, don't give up. You can still, if you have a good enough idea for a Doctor Who story, you can get it out there in the world.
Very much so. So, was it a request from the BBC to do a first Doctor story, and did you have any sort of brief when you were speaking with Michael?
No, really. When I first just asked him if I could submit some ideas, there was no kind of guide as to what Doctors I should submit for. I did have a look at the recent ones that had come out and the ones they had due to come out, and I thought maybe there would be an opportunity. They hadn't done perhaps too many first Doctor ones, and also just because I'd been writing about the beginning of the show, as I mentioned, my book Pull to Open, about the creation of the series, and it's something I'm very interested in, that whole era, and I just thought how nice it would be to do something with that original TARDIS team. And so I decided to submit the 4 ideas I submitted originally. They were all for that original TARDIS team, and they picked the one that they particularly liked. But no, I wasn't given any guidance of which Doctors they were looking for particularly, but I did have a look at the range and see where, I thought, well, maybe a first Doctor one they hadn't done like too many of, so that might be one that might be good to do. And I decided to go for that first TARDIS crew.
It feels very much season 1 to me. When I was listening to it, I was very much visualising something along the lines of the Sensorites in terms of the spaceship, the costumes and things like that. Was that sort of the vibe you were going for?
Yeah, well, in my head, it's set in that sort of season 1 to 2 gap. It's set between the Reign of Terror and Planet of Giants, because I wanted to feel. I think the earliest gap you can do is, I think it's between Marinus and the Aztecs. I think, isn't it? That's the first one. There's no cliffhanger, I think. But I felt like it was a little bit on for Ian and Barbara. I felt like Ian and Barbara was very much part of the team and quite used to what they were doing. And so sort of so it's kind of later in that run. So between seasons 1 and 2, felt like where it fitted for me. And the Sensorites does get a mention in it, actually, a little although that came up in the editing, because the edit was done by it was Steve Cole who did the edit and gave me the feedback and so forth for improvements and changes. And he'd mentioned, because I'd had there's this scene which I quite like, which is hopefully one of the better scenes in it, where Ian and Barbara are kind of looking out of this window in the ship and thinking about how they don't often get to sort of sit and stand there and look out at space, and Steve Cole pointed out, well, they did do that in the Sensorites when they were sort of hanging above. Oh yeah, okay, so I put a little kind of reference into that, but it is, hopefully it attempts to be of that era. Yeah,
because I think that with the science of all the space travel, it feels very 60s.
Yeah, but that is, yes, it's something that I wanted to have, because you don't often stop and think, do you, that when you land in a lot of these future eras, to the Doctor and Susan, a lot of it would be old technology. So the idea is that it seems fantastic and futuristic to Ian and Barbara, but it's actually very kind of old tech to the Doctor and Susan. And so I liked kind of playing with that and having that angle to it. And I tried to give it that kind of retro futuristic feel. Although there was one bit that I wrote that I was quite pleased with, but David Richardson, who did the review for Doctor Who magazine, didn't like, because he felt it took him out of the era too much. Where there's a bit where the Doctor's trying to explain to Ian and Barbara about something being a sort of data storage device, and he's searching for the right comparison to use for their era, and he says it's like a USB stick, and they just look at him blankly. So he said, like a tightly coiled roll of microfilm then, which I really liked. I was really pleased with that bit, but I suppose it just goes to show that you shouldn't be too pleased with what you've written, because David Richardson who did very kind review in Doctor Who magazine, he's very nice about the story, but he didn't like that. He felt it took him out of the 60s era too much. He didn't like the idea of a USB stick being referred to in something that is supposed to slot into an era produced in the 60s. He didn't feel that was right.
Interesting how what appeals to one person does not appeal to another. So
yeah, but one of the online review, one of the website reviews I've seen has been very nice about it, sort of feeling as if it was set in the right era. So that's one of it goes to show, doesn't it, with the reviews, you should never let yourself get sort of too carried away with the good ones, and you should never let yourself get too down about the bad ones, because it's all opinion, isn't it? It's all subjective, and you're never going to write a story that everyone thinks is the best. The one thing I'm pleased about, though, is that I sort of, even though I mentioned how I'd sort of got to the stage where I thought this was never going to happen, I had down the years thought to myself, if anything like this did ever happen, my sort of paranoia was that I would just blow it and write the worst Doctor Who story of all time. So my real ambition was to not write the worst Doctor Who story of all time. I know it sounds like a very low bar, but I thought if I could just get over that bar, that would be all right. And having seen the reviews so far, there's been some very nice reviews. There have been some reviews that are sort of maybe a bit lukewarm, but I've not seen a review yet that really lambasts it as the worst thing ever. So I think I've got away with that.
You haven't written Time Lash 2, so you're doing all right.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, I'm sure there will be people listening to this podcast who've listened to it and think, well, it was awful. I didn't like it at all. But hopefully not. Hopefully, as I say, I did my best to try and write something that was well. I mean, silly thing to say, isn't it? Because nobody sits down and tries to write something awful. Nobody deliberately sits down and tries to write something that people aren't going to enjoy, but hopefully, as I say, I seem to have succeeded in writing something that has not been universally hated by everybody, which is a good start.
Very much so. I mean, just come back to the space travel, I love the whole idea of it, the ship travelling in straight lines and then stopping, recalibrating and moving on, which I thought that's good. It feels very 60s, that, to me.
I'm glad you like that. Yeah, I quite like that. I mean, Steve Cole did point out that there are no straight lines in space. So I kind of, maybe it's because, I'm not a scientist at the end of the day. I'm not a kind of astrophysicist or anything like that. But I'm glad you like that. Yeah, it's sort of, it feels like the sort of thing they might have in sort of Pathfinders to Venus or something, doesn't it? So I'm glad you like that.
Yeah, I also like the fact there's the motivation of money comes in here in Greed, because we won't say exactly how, but in terms of insurance policies and things like that.
Oh yes,
that's a nice sort of contemporary feel to something in the 60s, and the way it's applied, it works really nicely.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, I was quite pleased with myself with the way that all kind of tied together. And again, that was something where I kind of learned through the editing with Steve, really, because originally that the motivation of that character, it was sort of explained a bit earlier on when he first gets sort of caught. He kind of blurts the whole story out then, and Steve pointed out, no, you want to hold that back a bit and maybe explain later on why he's done that. So you don't actually find out why he's done that until a bit towards the end in the later version. So it was real. I should thank Steve Cole a lot because, as I say, he did the edit, and I'm sure he must have been sitting there going through it thinking, why have they let this guy do one? But he was very nice and very helpful, and I did feel a bit embarrassed when I got the first edit back from him with sort of notes. I felt a bit disheartened, not because I disagreed with anything that he'd said, but just because I felt really disappointed in myself for not spotting these things that were wrong with it that he'd spot. I mean, I know he's a Doctor Who writer and editor with 30 years of experience, so he should be able to spot these things, and that's his whole job. But I felt a bit annoyed with myself for not having spotted. But I was pleased that kind of they didn't think it was so awful that they just kind of took it over and edited it themselves. They let me do the edit and get it up to the right kind of standard. So that was at least some reassurance that I wasn't completely hopeless.
So how did you find writing for the TARDIS regulars?
I think in some ways, I mean, you've probably heard this from other people who've written for all sorts of Doctors and Companions, but I think that was in some ways the easiest bit, because you've almost been rehearsing for this and researching for it for, in my case, 40 years now, because you in any shared universe thing like this, I think it's an advantage in that you have those characters there, but particularly when it's a TV series, when you've got so much material and you've known it for so long, you know how these characters should speak, and you know the way in which. I mean, I'm saying this as if I think I've got it right. People might listen to it and think, I haven't got the characters right at all. But I think that was one of the things. That was one of the things that didn't change much in the edit. How I'd characterised the Doctor and the Companions. So I think I got that pretty well. And there was one bit that Steve thought that's not right, where there's a bit where Susan's sort of the Doctor's explaining about what something was made of, and Susan sort of agrees, oh yes, that's right. And originally she sort of put a finger in it and tasted it, and Steve's, no, that's not right for what's just happened. So in the end she just goes up to it and gives it a sniff in this particular case. But that was the only bit where we changed what they did. But no, I found that kind of really, I don't want to say easy, obviously, but that was one of the less difficult bits, getting into the rhythm of writing in those characters, because I felt I could see them, I could hear them, I knew what they did. There's a kind of sense of responsibility with it, in the sense that there is a bit where Barbara and Ian are having a conversation, and we almost sort of touch on sort of what Ian did during the war, because obviously the age William Russell was, Ian, if we assume Ian was the same age, then Ian was old enough to have some sort of active service during the Second World War. But so I wanted to put a little hint of that in, but I thought, I do not have the right to decide what Ian Chesterton did during the Second World War. There's probably been other people who've gone into that in other places, because I haven't read and listened to every single thing that's been done in the expanded universe. But also, it's just, it's not the right of some snotty little first-timer writing a BBC audiobook to say what Ian Chesterton did in the Second World War. So I sort of enjoyed myself giving a little sort of, it's one of those classic moments where he's almost about to say, then they get interrupted by one of the drama bits of the story. So it was quite nice just to sort of almost just kind of tease myself by saying I could have put something into the lore here, but I thought, no, so I have absolutely no right to do that, so I'm not going to.
You also got to create your own aliens as well.
Yes, the Cleed, which I realised far too late afterwards was actually because Lance Parkin had the future Dalek race, the Clade. I thought, maybe it was a bit too close to that. Maybe I should have thought of another name. But I sort of tried to do a bit of a Terry Nation and describe a kind of completely non-humanoid monster. How well or not that works, I don't know, because again, that's one of the things we had to do in the edit, in that I thought I had quite a clear picture of them in my head, and I thought I'd described them quite clearly. But some of the feedback I got was that people found it difficult to kind of envisage them. But in the end, Lee Johnson has put a picture of one on the cover, which is a sort of slightly different shape to what I'd imagined. But I think that is canonically what it is now, the version that Lee's done for the front. So I imagined it being more like a kind of prow of a ship type shape, whereas he's done it more of a kind of upright kind of wedge. But that's neither here nor there. But I should say, actually, it'll give me a chance to say, do my Oscars acceptance speech and do the thank you to all the other people involved, which is obviously Lee Johnson for doing the cover. David Rucroft, particularly, I want to thank for the sound design, because he gets miscredited in the DWM review, where David Darlington is given the credit for the sound design, but it was David Rucroft who did the sound design. And Morris Nellis was the producer, and of course Christopher Naylor on narration duties. Big Finish's own Harry Sullivan doing a great array of different voices for all the different. And he does that great thing where, because obviously it's tricky when you're doing an audiobook and when you've got the regulars, the TARDIS crew, in that, you know, obviously he does that thing where he doesn't really do, you don't want really someone doing a kind of impression, because that would be kind of too distracting, but just he gives them the different kind of intonations, although he does do I guess he does do a kind of Hartnell impression almost for the Doctor's lines, but I think Chris does it really well, and with the number of different voices to deal with. So thank you very much to everyone who put it all together and made it work.
That's the 2 Chris Naylor readings you've had now, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because he did the reading of the BBC audiobook version of Pull to Open, because Michael Stevens, who runs BBC Audiobooks, he thought that, which I agreed with, that Chris had that kind of, he could do that sort of classic BBC voice, which was right for that. And having done that, Michael then thought it would be nice, sort of as a kind of tie-in, I suppose, to given that was all about the creation of Doctor Who, and I was the same writer writing a story for the first TARDIS team. He thought it would be nice to sort of have Chris do the narration for this as well, which I was very pleased with, and I was very, very pleased with how the whole thing turned out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it very much feels like a full package, because it was a good listen for me in my morning walk last week, and just kept it going, did it in one go, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that there's a great wee story in there, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for that.
No, thank you very much for listening to it, and thank you very much for enjoying it. It's good to hear that I've also passed the test with you of not writing in title case the worst Doctor Who story of all time, so that's good.
Most definitely not. Now, of course, having written one story, if you could do another, which Doctor would you like to do next?
Oh, well, I would love to do another. That's the thing now, that having done this, I keep coming up with ideas for Doctor Who stories, and I've got nowhere to put them. But I have asked if I could pitch another one for BBC Audiobooks, and Michael said that they're commissioned up quite a long way in the future at the moment. But I have submitted some ideas for some more, and when they're looking at starting commissioning again, I think a bit later this year, Michael said they're going to have a look and see if maybe could do one of those. There's a third Doctor story that I've submitted for the third Doctor, Liz and the Brigadier, which I think is sort of the best of the ideas that I've had, that I've submitted to Michael, and so if I could pick one, I think that would be the one to do, because I know how that story works. I think I've learned a lot from doing Starflight, and I think there's a lot of things I've learned from doing it that I could put into practice with this, and sort of how you do it and how you pace it and structure it to get it right. Because it's an odd, interesting length, because they're about an hour long, the BBC Audiobooks originals, so it's about 10,000 words. So it's a kind of long, short story. So it's a kind of what you almost want, which I didn't really. I think with Starflight, I tried to do a kind of full story compressed down, and I'm not necessarily sure if that was the right approach. I think almost what you want, and this would what I'd be try and do maybe with if I do another one. You almost want a kind of old-fashioned part one with an ending on it. I think that's almost kind of what you want with these, I think, but I didn't really. I mean, Michael might completely disagree. If Michael's listening to this, he might think, no, that's not right at all. That's not what we want. But that was just kind of there's this third Doctor idea that I've got that I think would be a nice one for BBC Audiobook, and various other ideas that keep coming to me that I don't know what to do with. I was sort of thinking, now I've done this and I've got, an actual professional real life Doctor Who fiction credit, could I, is there anywhere I could get in with Big Finish or something? But it's difficult because obviously, as you know, for perfectly very good reasons, Big Finish don't take unsolicited submissions, because obviously they would be absolutely swamped. They'd be drowning in them. So I don't really have any sort of in there. But yeah, if anyone's listening who's in a position to commission Doctor Who stories, I have various ideas I can put before you.
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about Starflight.
No, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you.
Starflight is also available from BBC Audiobooks as an audio download or an audio CD. And you can get the downloads from Apple Books, Audible, Google Play, Hive, Kobo, Libro FM, Spotify and Xig. I hope that does sound like an X when I'm saying it. Huge thanks again to John Peel as well, and to BBC Audiobooks for providing those little clips. So there we go. If you've enjoyed today's episode, feel free to leave a review for us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're at Power of 3 Pod on Twitter with a number 3. We're on Facebook and have a group there, so come in and like stuff there. And we're on Blue Sky as well at Finished Zine. So feel free to drop by and share your thoughts and chew the fat with us and tell us which of these audios you enjoyed and why you enjoyed them and the like. We always like to hear from you. So it's time to go. And I think we'd better head off with a tune into the sunset, and one by Madonna has sprung to mind, so Starflight, Starflight, that's how I sleep tonight, Starflight, Starflight. No, I think I'll just leave it to her going forward. So, I've been Kenny Smith, let's hear from Madonna and Lucky Star.